Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are enjoying your Saturday. If you haven't heard, there is a federal referral in alleged mortgage fraud investigation into Congressman Eric Swalwell. Also, we'll talk about the staffer who leaked Ghislaine Maxwell's emails is now out of a job. Let's get started. Welcome to Nellie Miranda.
Months ago, Fox can now confirm that California Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell has been criminally referred to the Department of Justice accused of mortgage fraud.
As always, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Okay, so on November 13th, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, under the leadership of Bill Pulte, made a referral to the United States Department of Justice recommending a criminal investigation into Representative Eric Swalwell, alleging possible mortgage fraud and tax fraud tied to a Washington, D.C. home that he purchased. Shortly afterwards, Swalwell responded, calling the allegations false, claiming the targeting was politically motivated and tied to his long record of opposition to President Donald Trump.
Can now confirm that California Democrat Congressman Eric Swalwell has been criminally referred to the Department of Justice accused of mortgage fraud. Senior White House correspondent Peter Doocy reporting live on this breaking news on Eric Swalwell from the North Lawn. Hey, Peter.
Martha, as I was walking up here to do a hit on a different topic, I got a call from an administration official filling us in that Eric Swalwell, the Democratic California congressman, has indeed been referred to the Justice Department by Bill Pulte, who is the head of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac right now, because he is accused of making false or misleading statements on a mortgage application. We believe that this pertains to a $1.2 million house that Swalwell has in the Washington, D.C. area. Swalwell has already responded. Part of his very long statement says, as the most vocal critic of Donald Trump over the last decade and as the only person who still has a surviving lawsuit against him, the only thing I am surprised about is that it took him this long to come after me. Like James Comey and John Bolton, Adam Schiff and Lisa Cook, Letitia James, and the dozens more to come, I refuse to live in fear in what was once the freest country in the world. Now, Swalwell has not been charged with anything. This is a criminal referral. Basically, a government agency thinks that they spotted something that is possibly illegal on mortgage documents from Swalwell. The Justice Department will now review these documents to see if a prosecutor believes that charges are worthy in this case, and then we would go from there in the judicial process. Martha.
Notice how in his statement he referenced Letitia James and Adam Schiff to make this appear as political persecution from President Trump himself. He also said, quote, I refuse to live in fear in what was once the freest country in the world, and finished by saying, I will not stop speaking out against the president and speaking up for Californians. So he just pulled a classic Democrat stunt. Every time they are accused of any potential wrongdoing, they try to group regular citizens in the mix with them. My focus is on speaking up for Californians. He framed himself as standing up not just for himself, but for democracy. He said nothing at all to address a single allegation. All he said was that he's surprised that it took Trump this long. Now, what innocent person sits around waiting to be criminally investigated? Nobody says, I am doing the right thing, but I just have a gut feeling that I'm about to be charged with mortgage fraud. Like, it's simple. Are you engaging in mortgage fraud or not?
That the Justice Department has opened a probe into California Congressman Eric Swalwell over alleged mortgage fraud. This after a criminal referral from Federal Housing Director Bill Pulte, who made allegations surrounding millions of dollars in loans and refinancing based on Swalwell declaring his primary residence is in Washington, not California. Swalwell branding himself a target of the president, saying this, as the only person who still has a surviving lawsuit against him, the only thing I am surprised about is that it took him this long to come after me. Says Swalwell. I will not end my lawsuit against President Trump, and I will not stop speaking out against the president, claims the California congressman. Joining me now is former federal prosecutor, former acting ICE director, and former DHS deputy assistant secretary, Jonathan Fahey. Jonathan, great to see you. Thanks for weighing in on this. Your reaction to the criminal referral on Eric Swalwell.
Well, I think it's pretty interesting, and certainly his reaction, we'll get to in a second, but the fact that he is listing his primary residence in Washington, D.C., assuming that's all true, and yet he's representing California in Congress, there's a problem there because you can't be a primary resident of both. So I think the things they're going to be looking into are what's he saying on his tax returns? Where does he have a driver's license? Does he even have a home in California? And what is he listed with that? Because my understanding is one of the addresses that was supposedly his address in California, somebody else lives there. So he could have a problem either way this thing shakes out. If he's falsely claiming a primary residence to get a lower interest rate and therefore money, that's a problem. If he actually lives in Washington, D.C. and isn't living in California but is voting there and represents there where he's required to be an inhabitant of the state, that's a problem too. So it's quite interesting. And just real quick on his response, President Trump probably has no idea that Eric Swalwell has a suit against him. And when you have a response like that, it makes you think, there's something up because he didn't directly answer the question. And if the answer to the question is, I primarily live here, but I'm also an inhabitant of California, he could have just said that, but he didn't. So that, I think it'll be very interesting as to what they come up with when they start digging a little bit deeper.
So again, the core allegations is that Swalwell may have falsely represented his primary residence in loan documents in order to gain favorable mortgage, tax, or insurance treatment. According to public records cited by outlets like the Washington Post, he bought a Washington, D.C. home in 2020 for about $1.2 million and later refinanced, obtained a home equity line of credit, etc. It is important to note that being under referral is not the same as being charged with a crime yet. The standard for mortgage fraud requires deliberate misrepresentation of income or residence, not merely complex financing. In my opinion, we must hold public officials accountable if they misuse the financial system. Yet, we also must guard against politically weaponized investigations where credible evidence is lacking. My hope is that the evidence is overbearing because, as you know, this is not the first Democrat to be under investigation for mortgage fraud. And Swalwell was sure to point that out in referencing Letitia James, Adam Schiff, and Lisa Cook.
Well, first, of course, these allegations are false, just like the allegations against Adam Schiff are false and Letitia James are false and Lisa Cook are false. And a spoiler alert for you, there will be allegations next week against somebody that'll be false. No, the Justice Department has not said anything just through leaked media reporting. But this is really about Donald Trump going after his political enemies. And no one has been a more vocal critic than me. And as you mentioned, I have one of the only remaining lawsuits against Donald Trump for his role on January 6th. I don't wake up every day going to work to fight Donald Trump. I fight for Californians. He just happens to get in the way. And if he thinks for 1 second that me or Adam Schiff or Tish James or Lisa Cook are going to back down or hide under the bed or shrink, he is wrong.
Swalwell is already spinning this as victimhood and as punishment for his opposition to President Trump. Is he a victim of politics or is he a public servant facing legitimate questions? Here's his response when asked what he will say when he is questioned about a double mortgage. Take note of how he said 2 or so lines in response to that, then quickly shifts to potential payback that's coming when Democrats are the majority. Watch.
As we wait to see if the Department of Justice seeks to take this up in a panel of grand jury, when folks ask you about the specific allegations of a double primary residence, what do you say about your situation?
Yeah, I only have one mortgage and a residence in California, and I spend my time every week between California and Washington, D.C. This is, again, just Donald Trump doing everything he can to target his enemies. In our lawsuit, it's not lost on me that we've begun to depose members of the administration. And so you can connect the dots there if you will. But this is why being in the majority also matters, because these guys think that they can do this because they're invincible and there are no consequences. And a year from now, we are going to win the majority. And that's what we learned last Tuesday when California voters stood up against Donald Trump. And when we're in the majority, we will have subpoena power and accountability will happen. So Bill Pulte and any other lawless official who is carrying out these political prosecutions on behalf of Donald Trump, they should familiarize themselves with the Judiciary Committee room, because they're going to be spending a lot of time there answering questions. And I sure hope everything they did was above board.
To wrap up, arguably, the most important question isn't who gets referred, it's how the process is conducted, how transparent the evidence is, and whether the same rules applies across the board. Swalwell's defiance today, "I will not live in fear," may appeal rhetorically, but it doesn't answer the core question. Did he misuse the mortgage system or not? And if he did, he deserves to be held accountable. Do you think this case will lead to actual charges, or is it going to be swept under the rug like so many others? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Okay, moving on to our next story. Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney says that prison staffers at her facility were fired after leaking her emails, and that leak has sparked a firestorm. This story raises serious questions about justice, equality under the law, and political power.
It was already questionable that she got moved to this minimum security prison camp earlier this year. Convicted sex offenders, that normally doesn't happen. Tell us what you've learned about her life since getting there.
Well, there's no question, Anderson, that she is being given accommodations that would not be typically given to the average inmate. And this photo, actually, that we're looking at on the screen was taken on September 20th at this Bryan, Texas minimum security prison facility. According to the photographer that day, she was seen during the lunch break carrying folders, a clear backpack, and headphones. But just in terms of the details that we learned about her life, the big thing is that she's largely isolated, and she's being afforded a level of privacy that inmates typically don't get. For example, her roommates at some point were moved out of her room. There are typically 4 roommates that share a room at this prison facility. When she didn't like at one point that inmates were able to look into her cell, sitting at tables that were close to the entrance, the tables were then moved. We also have an example of her using the chaplain's office at the chapel at the prison for visitations outside of regular visitation hours. A couple other details: meals and mail were at one point being brought to her. We're also learning that she has unlimited access to toilet paper. Typically, just for context, each inmate gets 2 rolls per week. Anything over that, you have to go to the commissary and buy a roll at $2.25 a pop. So remember, the important context and the timing of this is really important too, because there was this whistleblower that came out earlier this week and talked about some of these details and some additional details as well, including the fact that Maxwell apparently is working on a commutation application, and the prison's warden has been giving her help as she has been working on that.
Here's what we know. Maxwell is serving a 20-year federal sentence for her role in aiding the sex trafficking network tied to Jeffrey Epstein. She was then transferred to the low-security facility, Federal Prison Camp Bryan in Texas. At that facility, as you've just heard, she's been given special preferential treatment. Recently, several staffers accessed her emails without authorization, and those emails ended up being shared with members of Congress and then the media. Her attorney, Leah Safian, claims that the leaks violated Maxwell's constitutional rights, which led to the staffers being terminated. On the flip side, the staffers and a whistleblower claimed they were exposing preferential treatment of Maxwell, custom meals, special privileges, etc., which in my opinion is highly likely based on everything we've seen so far.
Ghislaine Maxwell, in her own words, describing life in her new prison home. "I feel like I have dropped through Alice in Wonderland's looking glass," she writes, a federal prison Camp Bryan, according to emails she sent to friends and family reviewed by NBC News. "I am much, much happier here," she writes. Maxwell is serving a 20-year sentence for recruiting minors to be sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. The emails obtained by the House Judiciary Committee investigating allegations of special treatment, written by Maxwell after an abrupt and unusual transfer from a low-security facility in Florida to this all-women's camp in Texas, typically reserved for white-collar criminals. The move came amid backlash over the DOJ and FBI announcement in July that a review found no incriminating client list. Soon after, Maxwell met with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche.
Did you know of the existence of any such list?
There is no list.
Days later, she was transferred and writing emails gushing over her improved conditions. "The food is legions better. The place is clean. The staff responsive and polite," she wrote. Saying in another, "You are not allowed to steal, beat people up, and attack them with homemade weapons." The Justice Department, which oversees federal prisons, declined to comment. Maxwell's attorney saying in a statement, "It's time to get over the fact that she's in a safer facility. We should want that for everyone." The family of abuse survivor Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who later died by suicide, saying, "We strongly reject the notion that a convicted child sex trafficker should reside in a residential neighborhood, shielded by fences, instead of bars."
Ghislaine Maxwell's case involved vulnerable minors exploited by powerful elites. To suggest that the perpetrator is being coddled while victims still wait for full justice is morally troubling. Money cannot be everything. Inmates inside of the low security prison cannot even speak out against her. Imagine being told to treat a known child predator like she's some innocent saint. It's absolutely sickening.
And some of Maxwell's fellow inmates are apparently upset about her being there. Are they speaking out?
Yeah, there was a lot of shock and I think outrage for many of the inmates inside this prison because, as you noted, when you are a convicted child sex trafficker and you also have the vast majority of that sentence still to serve, you don't just end up at a minimum security prison. And I'm told that the warden at one point actually had a town hall meeting with all of the inmates after Maxwell arrived. And she basically said, do not talk about her to anybody. And she also said, look, she's going to be treated like any other inmate. But there's an example of one fellow inmate at Bryan. Her name is Julie Howell, and she actually ended up giving a comment to a reporter. She actually had a daughter who was the victim of sex trafficking. So you can imagine why the presence of Maxwell in her prison would have been especially sort of troubling for her and really offensive, I think, in her view. And after she gave this comment to a reporter, she was summoned to the lieutenant's office. She was scolded. And then she eventually was transferred out of Bryan to a higher security prison in Houston. And what's interesting, Anderson, is that we have learned that apparently this has happened to several other inmates as well who have expressed concern about Maxwell being there.
The story of Ghislaine Maxwell's leaked emails, fired prison staff, and preferential treatment is more than one woman or one prison. It is a litmus test for our justice system. It forces us to ask, are the rules the same for everyone, or do some people get a separate deal? The answer should be equality, but let's be honest. Money and power usually call the shots. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if honest commentary brings you value, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, and tap the notification bell so you never miss an update. Also, a federal judge denied Congresswoman LaMonica McIver's bid to toss out an assault case against her, ruling that her alleged actions had no legislative purpose. If you missed that breakdown I did on that earlier, I'll link it right above. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.